some difficulty, but our court reporting system is now working. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm inclined simply to turn to counsel and ask if there are any preliminary matters you wish to address. If not, I'm going to bring the jury in and allow the state to call its first rebuttal witness.
No, we were moments away from, I think, having a final and complete set of instructions. I think Ms. Duncan has renewed motion.
May I approach the podium?
Yes.
Good morning, Judge. Judge, the defense, having rested their case at this time, would renew all motions and objections and renew the judgment of acquittal argued at the close of the state's case. The defense has presented evidence at this juncture of insanity to overcome our burden and to raise doubt as to the sanity of Ms. Schenecker. Our position is that the state has not adduced any evidence during its case in chief to dispute this, nor was it rebutted during the cross-examination of our experts yesterday. At no point during the testimony did Dr. Solomon, Myers, or Mayer waver in their opinion that the defendant was insane at the time of the offense. Some of the questions that were asked of Dr. Solomon during cross-examination focused on whether in the USF records there was mentions of delusions in the USF records, and the doctor did state during her cross-examination that there were other psychotic symptoms present in the records. However, that was not brought out by the state in the questioning. I would argue that the mere fact that there were no delusions or suicidal thoughts reported doesn't prove that the defendant was sane beyond a reasonable doubt, especially in the presence of the other evidence adduced from Dr. Solomon. And our position would be that because the evidence shows that at the time of the offense, Ms. Schenecker was not capable of fully forming a conscious intent to kill, and insanity hasn't been rebutted during the case in chief or the presentation of the defense case, that the judgment of acquittal should be granted at this juncture, and the defendant should be found not guilty by reason of insanity, or that the charges should be reduced to a charge that does not require proof of premeditation, proof of defendant's intent. Thank you.
State.
I would ask you to reserve on the motion until such time as the state has finished its rebuttal case, Your Honor.
Granted. Other matters before bringing jury.
No, Your Honor.
No, sir.
Bring jury in. seated. And good morning, members of the jury. Going to proceed this morning by turning to the state. And you may call your first rebuttal witness.
State calls Dr. Otto.
Inquire, Coach.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Can you state your full name for the record and spell your last name for the court reporter, please?
Randy Kurt Otto, O-T-T-O.
What do you do for a living, sir?
My primary position is I'm a faculty member at the University of South Florida. Been an instructor, professor there for 25 years. And in addition to that, completely separate from that, I have a practice that's pretty much limited to what's called forensic psychological evaluation, evaluating people whose mental state is at issue in some kind of legal dispute.
Okay. You indicated that you're a faculty member at USF. In what department?
It's called the Department of Mental Health Law and Policy. That's my primary appointment. I have adjunct appointments in the Department of Criminology and the Department of Rehabilitation and Mental Health Counseling.
Okay. How long have you held that position?
I've been at USF since the summer of 1989, so 25 years next month.
Okay. Can you tell us what you do at USF in these departments?
My experience, my involvement in criminology, rehabilitation and mental health counseling in the Department of Psychology. I'm also an adjunct there. It's pretty much limited to teaching. I teach undergraduates and graduate students. In the Department of Mental Health Law and Policy, my primary responsibilities are research and training, research on the interaction between the legal and the mental health systems, and training of mental health professionals and training of lawyers about interactions between mental health and the law.
Okay. And you indicated that you have a forensic practice?
Yeah, I'm licensed as a psychologist in the state. My specialty is forensic psychology, which is essentially the application of psychology to legal matters.
Okay. And how long have you had that practice?
Since the fall of 1989. I was licensed in the fall of 1989.
And as what kind of things do you do in your practice?
My practice is primarily evaluating individuals whose mental state is at an issue in a legal proceeding. I would estimate about 80% of the work I do in that arena involves criminal defendants, people charged with offenses, assessing their competence, criminal responsibility, evaluating them to inform the judge's opinion at sentencing. About 20% of it involves other matters, maybe people involved in some kind of civil litigation, a guardianship proceeding, personal injury, where they're alleging they're emotionally damaged as a result of someone's wrongdoing. And I also do some consultation with a company around issues of workplace violence, where there's an employee of concern and they might have issues or concerns that the employee might hurt himself or hurt other people.
Okay. Can you just outline for the jury what your education and training is to work as a professor at USF and to work in the area of forensic psychology?
Bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Rochester in 1981. From there, I came immediately to Florida. I obtained master's and doctoral degrees, PhD, master's and doctoral degrees in clinical psychology from Florida State University up in Tallahassee. As part of that, I had to do a one-year internship. I did that at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. That was from 86 to 87. After I finished that, I went to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and I was a fellow there in law and psychology. That's kind of advanced training. I obtained a master's degree in legal studies in this program that was managed by the College of Law at the University of Nebraska and the Department of Psychology. And that was pretty much my formal training. And after that, I came down here to USF.
Okay. And you indicated that you have a license. Who's that license from?
I have a license from the Department of Health here in Florida. I've been licensed to practice psychology since 1989. I'm also board certified in clinical psychology and forensic psychology. You kind of think about your physicians being board certified. It's not a license, it's a certification by a professional body that examines you and examines your competence, your ability to practice. I have that in two areas, clinical psychology and forensic psychology.
Okay, you indicated that you are board certified by a body. Which bodies have you been board certified by?
The American Board of Professional Psychology, it's been around since 1947. It's the largest organization that certifies psychologists.
Okay. How long have you been board certified in clinical psychology and forensic psychology?
I was board certified in forensic psychology in 1994, and I was board certified in clinical psychology, I think it was 2010.
Okay. What did you have to do or undergo to become board certified in those fields?
A minimum number of years of practice, so you have to have experience. Then you have to have specific training in your specialty area. For the forensic certification, I had to submit what's called practice samples. I sent them work that I did, and it was reviewed by board-certified forensic psychologists, and then I had to defend that work in a 3-hour session where these psychologists quizzed me about my practice and my knowledge. Clinical psychology was similar, but the practice samples I sent to them weren't devoted to forensic matters, but more general clinical psychology matters.
Okay, so it would be different boards reviewing you for each certification?
Correct.
And this certification, is this a lifetime certification, or do you have to renew it every so often?
Right now, it's a lifetime certification. We've just imposed changes, I'm president of the American Board of Professional Psychology. We just imposed changes to require recertification every 10 years. Now, for people like me, who were certified many years ago, there is this grandfathering process where you don't have to undergo it, although people like me who were certified many years ago, we have the option of renewing, and I will be seeking that renewal when it becomes available.
Okay,
But we just put it in place.
You're the president of this American Board of
President of the American Board of Professional Psychology, and there's 13 member boards: American Board of Forensic Psychology, the American Board of Clinical Psychology, the American Board of School Psychology, the American Board of Clinical Neuropsychology, and on and on.
Okay. Have you received any awards or commendations for your work, or by any boards or any associations?
My colleagues and I received an award from the Society for Personality Assessment for some work we did in the forensic area. A few years ago, I received an award from the American Academy of Forensic Psychology for my work in the forensic psychology area. And I also received awards for my work from the University of California, San Francisco, and the New York State Psychological Association. All of that really kind of due to the work I've done at the university on forensic psychology practice.
Okay. And have you actually published books or articles in the area of forensic psychology or clinical psychology?
Yeah, I have about 6 books that I've published, and I think it's fair to say they're all devoted to forensic psychology practice in some way, and I have 50, 60 articles published in professional journals about forensic psychology practice.
Okay. And how long did you say you specialized in the area of forensic psychology?
Well, since my graduate training, but as a practicing professional since 1989.
Okay. And how long have you practiced in the area of clinical psychology? Since 1989 as well?
As a practicing professional, as a licensed professional, correct.
Okay. And as part of your job and your practice, do you do forensic evaluations of persons accused of crimes?
Yeah, that's the bulk of my practice, evaluating criminal defendants.
Okay. And what kind of evaluations do you do in that practice?
The majority of those evaluations are of competence to stand trial, whether someone's able to understand and participate in the legal process. Next most common would be evaluations of sanity or mental state at the time of the offense. How were they functioning emotionally, behaviorally, and cognitively at the time of the offense or the alleged offense? And then thirdly, I would say, I also evaluate individuals who have either been convicted or pled guilty to an offense, and the judge is looking for some understanding of their psychological functioning to inform his or her sentence.
Okay.
We call those sentencing evaluations.
And I take it you have done evaluations for sanity at the time of a crime since 1989?
It's beginning in 1989, correct.
Can you say how many criminal defendants you've actually evaluated for criminal sanity or insanity at the time of the crime?
Yeah, well, I can estimate. I don't count the numbers. I would conservatively estimate that I've evaluated maybe 7 to 8 people a year for 25 years. Much more common are evaluations of someone's competence to stand trial than their sanity.
And of those people that you've reviewed for sanity at the time of the crime, was the majority for the defense or was the majority for the state?
When I've been hired by an attorney to evaluate a defendant's mental state at the time of the offense, their sanity, it's most typically been, I've been hired by the defense.
Okay. And when you are hired by the defense, do you automatically decide, well, this person's insane?
Well, no, that would go against my obligation to impartiality, objectivity, to tell the truth and all of that.
Okay. You know, of the people that you've reviewed for the defense or been hired by the defense, how many people have you actually found insane at the time of the crime?
Again, I don't keep a list. I don't have a great memory around those issues. I know of the most recent evaluations I've done within the past half year, I've been retained 3 times by the defense. Twice I offered opinions supporting a claim of not guilty by reason of insanity, and once I offered...
Yes, sir. Next question.
So if I understand correctly, when you've been hired by the defense, you have found people sane at different times?
I've offered an opinion supportive of a verdict of sane, yes.
Okay. And there have been occasions you've been hired by the state of Florida?
Yes.
Okay. And during those occasions, have you offered opinions that a person was insane at the time of the crime?
Yes.
Okay. And as part of your duties, either at USF or in your practice, do you conduct training of individuals for doing evaluations on sanity or insanity at the time of the crime?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And have you testified as an expert on the issue of sanity at the time of a crime or on the issue of forensic psychology or clinical psychology?
Yes, I have.
How many times in a court of law?
Again, I don't keep a list. I would conservatively estimate that I testify perhaps 20 times a year. I do many more evaluations, but maybe actually get up on the witness stand and testify no more than 20 times a year, maybe even less, 15 times a year.
Okay, and that's per year since 1989?
Correct.
Okay. What jurisdictions have you been qualified to testify as an expert in the area of sanity at the time of the crime?
Sanity, Orlando, I think that's the 9th Circuit. Tampa, that's the 13th Circuit. And Clearwater, St. Petersburg, the 6th Circuit. I believe they're the only circuits in which I've testified about someone's mental state at the time of the offense.
Okay. And how many times have you testified in the area of forensic psychology or clinical psychology as an expert witness?
oh, at least 20 times a year in Florida and other jurisdictions.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I would tender the witness for voir dire on his qualifications.
No questions, Judge.
May continue.
Now, sir, you've been talking about your expertise being in forensic psychology. Can you just explain to the jury what forensic psychology is?
The application of psychology to legal issues or legal concerns.
Okay. And what is clinical psychology?
Clinical psychology is psychology devoted to understanding both normal and abnormal human behavior.
Okay. And when you are asked to review a case for a person's sanity or insanity at the time of the crime, what are you looking for? What is the standard that you're applying?
The legal standard?
Yes.
It depends on the jurisdiction. The test differs depending on the state you're in. My understanding as a non-lawyer of the standard in Florida is, A, at the time of the offense, did the person have a mental disorder of some type? And B, if so, did the mental disorder operate so that the person didn't know the nature and consequences of his or her actions, what he or she was doing, or didn't know the wrongfulness of his or her actions, didn't know that his or her behavior was wrong.
Okay. Do you also review the person's behavior to see if they recognize whether society would view their behavior as wrong?
I think, yeah, part of the wrongfulness is what society thinks of that behavior.
Okay. Now, in your experience, how common is it for you to find that somebody is legally insane?
Most times when I'm asked to evaluate a defendant with respect to their sanity at the time of the offense, I offer an opinion that the person doesn't meet the criteria because in Florida it's a very restrictive criteria, at least from my perspective.
Okay. And can a person be mentally ill and still be legally sane?
Yes, in fact, I believe the large majority of people who are mentally ill at the time of the offense are sane.
Okay.
They knew what they were doing.
Sane at the time of the crime?
Certainly.
Now, I want to take your attention to the case of State of Florida versus Julie Schenecker, the defendant in this case. How did you get involved in this case?
I was contacted by the prosecutor's office, specifically Mr. Pruner.
Okay, do you recall when that was?
I think I have a letter that documents that. I believe it was in 2011.
Okay.
I don't have that letter here, but 2011.
Okay. What were you asked to do in this case for the State of Florida?
Well, during our initial contact, Mr. Pruner just mentioned the case, asked if I had any potential conflicts, and said that he anticipated, during our phone call, that he anticipated that an insanity defense might be raised, and asked if I'd be willing to...
Judge, your approach.
Yes, sir.
You were contacted by Mr. Pruner. What was your understanding of what you were going to do in this case?
He wanted me to be available, or wanted to know if I would be available to evaluate the defendant in case a defense of not guilty by reason of insanity was...
Approach again.
Yes.
Was your understanding that you were going to review the defendant for state of mind at the time of the offense?
Yes.
What materials were you provided in order to start your evaluation of the defendant?
I was provided a large number of documents and records that came in over time. I didn't get one big box. They came in over time, and in fact, some of those records were provided on DVDs. So a very large number of documents that I have a list of.
Okay. Would it refresh your memory as to what documents you were provided to review your report?
Yes.
Okay. If you can do that and let us know what documents specifically what documents you were provided.
Okay, documents, and this is not in the order I was provided them. Psychological testing that was administered by a number of mental health professionals involved in this case. A transcript of Ms. Schenecker's interrogation. A video of Ms. Schenecker meeting with and talking to her attorney while she was at Tampa General Hospital. The arrest report and all the supplementary reports that the police filled out who arrived at her house. Autopsy reports and photos, crime scene photos, a DCF investigation record, a note written from Ms. Schenecker to her daughter detailing her illness, a letter from the defense attorney's office documenting Ms. Schenecker's family history of mental illness, email communications between Ms. Schenecker, Mr. Schenecker, and other family members, what's referred to as a mitigation report completed by the defense attorney, a document summarizing Ms. Schenecker's life and things, a notebook containing writings that were authored by Ms. Schenecker in the days before and after the offenses, a journal Ms. Schenecker had authored, Ms. Schenecker's military records, her treatment records from Tampa General Hospital, from USF, from Winmore Healthcare Facility, from the National Institutes of Health, and other mental health and healthcare professionals in the military and private practitioners. Her medical records from the Hillsborough County Jail, a letter authored by a pharmacist who was hired by the defense, some legal documents including the defendant's notice to rely on the insanity defense, depositions of a large number of officers with the Tampa Police Department who were involved in the investigation, depositions of a teacher, a neighbor, a coach, familiar with the Scheneckers in one way or the other, a deposition of the medical examiner, the physician who conducted the autopsy, and depositions of three mental health professionals, Dr. Mayer, Dr. Solomon, and Dr. Kropp. And then after that, all of that, and after I wrote my report, I was provided with, I believe, an MRI that had been conducted, as well as the case notes of Dr. Myers.
Okay. And were you also provided a video of the defendant at a gun store, lock and load?
I don't believe I was provided with that.
Okay. Now, you indicated that you were provided information on psychological testing administered by certain doctors?
Correct.
Who were those doctors?
Solomon, Myers, and Kropp.
Okay. And were those all defense experts or defense doctors?
That was my understanding.
Okay. And were you familiar with the tests that these doctors administered?
Most, but not all of them.
Okay. And had you administered some of these tests before?
Most, but not all of them.
Okay. And did you administer any tests in this case?
I did not.
Why not?
A few issues. Primarily, the focus of the inquiry was Ms. Schenecker's emotional, behavioral, and cognitive functioning at and around the time of the offenses, which was literally years after I saw her. Most psychological tests tell us about how someone's functioning today when we administer the test. And the relationship between how someone's functioning today and 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago, it's not a great relation, it's not a great predictor, let's say. Given that, and given the large amount of information I had about Ms. Schenecker's psychiatric history, I thought that testing would not be that helpful. It would take more time and it would cost more money. So I didn't think it necessary, but I didn't do it. I certainly administer tests when I believe they'll be helpful or necessary.
Okay. But in this case, you decided these tests would not be helpful.
They weren't necessary. I can't say they weren't helpful, but they're not necessary.
Okay. And they tell you more about the person's functioning at the time that the test is administered?
I would say that every test, every psychological test that Ms. Schenecker was administered, the primary purpose is to tell you how the person is functioning as they take the test, not months or years before.
Okay. And you indicated that you had a copy of the defendant's interview with the detectives?
I did.
Okay. Did you listen to that interview?
I did.
Okay.
I also had a transcript.
Okay. And you also indicated you had emails between the defendant and Mr. Schenecker, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you indicated you had records from Tampa General Hospital, USF, and I believe from the National Institute of Health?
Yes.
Okay. What were you able to glean or get from those records?
That Ms. Schenecker had a long history of mental illness that was initially diagnosed as depression, but then ultimately changed to bipolar disorder, intermittent periods of depression and mania, that she had an extensive history of treatment for that mental disorder, including up until and through the time of the offenses, and that in addition to her problems with bipolar disorder, she had problems with substance abuse.
Okay. And in regards to the USF records, specifically, what did you see in those records that was significant to you?
That she was participating in and receiving treatment up through the time of the offenses, that despite the treatment, she continued to remain symptomatic. She still had struggles with depression, even though she was being treated. And her problems with substance abuse were significant and were of concern to her providers.
Okay. In the USF records, what evidence of psychotic behavior did you see exhibited or documented in those records?
I didn't see clear evidence of psychotic behavior, perhaps with the exception of at least one note by the counselor that she was seeing at USF indicating that she appeared confused. Confusion might result from psychotic behavior. Confusion can result from other things as well, like substance abuse or too much medication or things like that.
Okay. And what evidence of delusions or hallucinations did you see in the USF records?
I saw, to the best of my memory, I saw no reference to hallucinations, right? Seeing or hearing things that aren't there, or delusions, fixed false beliefs, right? Inaccurate beliefs that are fixed. They won't go away no matter how much evidence you provide that flow from a mental disorder.
Okay. Now, at some point, did you interview the defendant?
I did.
Before interviewing the defendant, had you reviewed all the materials?
Before interviewing the defendant, I reviewed almost all of the materials, but not all of the materials.
Okay. And how many times did you interview the defendant?
I met with her 5 times, met with her and her attorney 5 times.
Okay. And about how many hours did you spend with the defendant?
As I added up, 14.5 hours with the defendant and her attorney.
Okay. And the interviews with the defendant, why did you decide to interview the defendant?
Well, you're trying to figure out how someone was thinking, behaving, and feeling at and around the time of the alleged offense, or in this case, the offenses. So it's good to talk to them to get their perspective on how they were doing.
Okay. Do you go in there knowing that a criminal defendant may, I guess, manipulate facts or...
Project us to approach.
Yes.
Now, when you go to interview a person accused of a crime, what frame of mind do you go into the interview with?
Well, I try to I try to avoid any assumptions about what happened, and I know there's at least always two sides to every story. So no matter what I've been provided with up front, I try to go in with an open mind to kind of getting their perspective, which, not surprisingly, often differs from at least in some ways differs from what you've read in the arrest reports or things like that.
Okay. And what was the time frame of your interviews with the defendant?
I interviewed her in March 2013, December 2013, and January of 2014, 5 times over those months.
Okay. And when you go to interview the defendant, what would you explain to her first?
I would, it's important to tell the defendant who you are, what you do, and who you work for. Just so they know kind of what you're going to do, and so they can make a decision as to whether to participate with you, and they kind of go in with their eyes open.
Okay. And when you first meet with the defendant, on each visit, would you do what is called a mental status examination?
I don't.
Object to being asked to approach again.
Yes. Next question, sir.
What is a mental status examination?
A mental status examination is a gross, informal assessment of someone's attention, concentration, their memory, their orientation, and whether they're experiencing any obvious symptoms of neurologic or psychiatric impairment.
Okay. At the beginning of your interviews with the defendant, what would you do in regards to establishing whether you could speak to her?
I didn't conduct a mental status examination, but rather made a judgment as to whether, with any defendant, begin interacting with them and make an assessment as to how they're communicating, whether they're understanding, whether they're functioning, whether they're attending and concentrating. If they can communicate with you, then they can communicate with you. If I'm going to conduct a mental status examination, a very gross, unstructured assessment, it's typically towards the end of the interview rather than earlier in the interview, unless I see obvious problems.
Okay. And how would you describe the defendant's demeanor when you met with her?
She was serious, she was cooperative, sometimes she was pleasant and was able to smile. When we talked about difficult issues like some of her family challenges and the offenses, she was understandably more upset and distressed.
Okay. How would you describe her ability to express herself to you?
I thought Ms. Schenecker did a good job of expressing herself. She was sometimes tangential and circumstantial. What that means is she would sometimes, I'd ask her a question about this, and then she'd start talking about that. So that made interviewing her a little challenging. She reported a lack of memory for some important things.
Okay.
At times.
Okay. And during these interviews, did you discuss the homicides with the defendant?
I did on a number of occasions, yes.
And what did she tell you she remembered about those?
She reported having a memory for shooting her son and returning him to the house. She reported a memory for shooting her daughter and putting her daughter in a bed. She reported a memory for reloading the weapon, taking a bunch of medications, drinking alcohol, which she reported she began after the murders, and then she reported a minimal memory after that, and then kind of her next memory being approached by police officers while she was out on the back lanai, police officers who had been called to the scene.
Okay. Did the defendant discuss with you buying or purchasing the firearm?
She did report that.
What did she tell you about that?
She told me that she purchased the firearm to kill herself. She said she woke up one morning with the clear thought, I will kill myself, and she went to purchase a firearm with that intent to kill herself. She said she eventually found her way to a gun shop where she was able to make the purchase, and that she instructed the store owner that she was purchasing the gun for home break-ins when her intent was actually to kill herself.
Okay. When she told you that her intent was to kill herself, did she mention that her intent to kill the children?
No. Consistently during my interviews with her, Ms. Schenecker reports she had no memory for ever thinking about or intending to kill her children.
Okay. How did that differ from documentation that you had received?
What I refer to as the journal, which is the notes that Ms. Schenecker, my understanding is the notes that Ms. Schenecker wrote at and around the time of the offenses, there was clear reference to her planning to kill the children and having killed the children. That's the first thing. And then, long after I wrote the report, I was provided with Dr. Myers' notes. And in his notes, Dr. Myers wrote that Ms. Schenecker reported to him that after she purchased the gun to kill herself, it occurred to her that she would kill the children as well, which I did not get from her.
Okay. How does that inconsistency affect your opinion in this case?
Well, I'm swayed by the journal entries and her report to Dr. Myers that she intended to kill her children. I find, in my opinion, I find that more persuasive than her report to me that she had no memory for ever intending to kill her children.
Okay. Did you discuss with the defendant her relationship with her daughter, Calix?
I did.
And what did she tell you about her relationship with her daughter?
She described a very strained relationship with her daughter that pretty much started as her daughter entered the 9th grade at King High School. She described her daughter as angry with her, critical of her, embarrassed of her, and eventually coming to ignore her, literally ignore her, apparently at the suggestion of a counselor her daughter had been seeing. That's what Ms. Schenecker told me.
Okay. Did you notice any kind of change in her demeanor when she spoke about her daughter?
No. I would say that while Ms. Schenecker spoke about her very strained relationship with her daughter, she always had a tone of fondness for her. She wasn't angry. She wasn't resentful as she talked about it, although she did talk about some of the behaviors her daughter engaged in to alienate the two of them.
Okay. Did you discuss her relationship with her ex-husband, Parker Schenecker?
I did.
And what was she able to tell you about that relationship?
It was very interesting. She I thought she talked in many different ways about this relationship, which I don't think is uncommon. She described her husband as emotionally abusive, and as putting her needs secondary to his for much of the marriage, and him wanting her to appear like the perfect family for his military career, and it was clear that she had a lot of animosity. At the same time, she told me that he was the love of her life, and she loved him very much. And those feelings are inconsistent, perhaps, but people who've been involved in close relationships understand that you can feel both sets of things.
Okay. Did she ever indicate to you how she felt about her husband at the time of the killing?
She reported specifically that she felt that he, as well as the other families members, had been shutting her out, had been neglecting, had neglected her during her during her hospitalization for substance abuse treatment, and she had concerns. She reported concerns about a pending divorce at and around that time.
Okay. Did she ever discuss to you how she felt about her perception of a pending divorce?
I don't remember discussing her feelings about the pending divorce.
Okay. And did you discuss her use of alcohol or opiates with her?
I did.
And what was she able to tell you about that?
Ms. Schenecker acknowledged that she was abusing alcohol in the months before the murders, and she reported taking pain-killing medication in the opiate family that was prescribed for her, but she reported sometimes taking it not for physical pain that she might have experienced as a result of multiple surgeries. That was the ostensible reason for the medication being prescribed. But she reported also taking that medication for what she described as the emotional pain, the pain of the depression she was experiencing.
Did you discuss with her stay in Winmore?
We talked about her hospitalization at Winmore.
Okay. And what did she tell you about that?
She did not like it. She did not like her. It was not a positive experience. She reported that she wanted to leave earlier than she did, and she was somewhat, at the time, she was angry with her husband because he wouldn't come and take her home early, which would have been around Thanksgiving.
Okay. And after speaking with Ms. Schenecker, what was the next thing you did in this case?
Eventually, I came to talk with her husband, and as I indicated before, there were some documents that I was provided after I spoke with Ms. Schenecker over multiple months, over multiple times. Then when I believed I had all the information that I was about to get, and given my understanding that there were some timelines with respect to writing a report, I set about to finishing my report.
Okay. Now, based on what you saw of the defendant and spoke to the defendant about, what delusions did you think the defendant was suffering at the time that she committed the killings?
It's my opinion that Ms. Schenecker was not experiencing any delusions at or around the time of the murders. Delusions, fixed false beliefs attributable to a mental disorder.
Okay. The suggestion or the thought that she killed her children to save them from a horrible world, do you feel that's a delusion?
No, I don't believe the belief. Killing your children is not a delusion. That's an action. The belief that the world is horrible is not a delusion, from my perspective, nor that if you die, you won't experience the world is not a delusion. So I don't see that as a delusion.
Okay. How about the writing or the suggestion that she feared that Bo or her daughter would be molested, or Bo would be molested because he was smaller than most kids?
Ms. Schenecker talked with me about her concerns that her children would be sexually abused. She anchored that concern in her own experience and history of abuse. And she said that as a result, she had concerns about them. She specifically talked about concerns related to her son because of his smaller stature, and she also described a particular incident where Bo had a sleepover and there was a significantly older boy there, and she was wondering what that was all about. She expressed concerns about her daughter as well. She talked about her daughter being bullied by a boy in one episode, and she said that because of these concerns, she explicitly talked about abuse with them so that they would be alert to it, and maybe she could prevent happening to them what happened to her. So as I saw that, I saw maybe heightened concern about the possibility of her children being abused as a result of her own experience. But I didn't see her as stating that she knew they would be abused or that they were abused. So I didn't see a fixed false belief.
Okay. How about the idea that she had to kill her daughter because she feared her daughter would become bipolar? Did you see that as a delusion?
Okay, again, the first part of that, killing your daughter, that's not a delusion, that's an action. That her daughter was at risk for experiencing a mood disorder generally, that's not a delusion, that's reality. The reality of the situation is if a close family member has something like bipolar disorder, the odds that you'll struggle with it are greater than if a family member doesn't have such an illness. So that's not a fixed false belief. Ms. Schenecker never said to me, for example, I know my daughter will have bipolar disorder. She expressed to me that on one or two occasions, her daughter had voiced suicidal intent, had talked about killing herself. So that actually might support her concerns about her daughter struggling with a mood disorder. Although I don't believe her daughter was ever diagnosed with a mood disorder.
So you didn't view that as a delusion as well?
Did not.
Okay, because it had a basis in reality.
Correct.
Okay. And what is there any research or any literature that supports that if one person is bipolar, that it can be genetically passed to the children or next generations?
I don't think genetically passed is the right way to think about it, but there's clearly a biological genetic basis to bipolar disorder and other psychiatric illnesses. And if you have a close family member who suffers with that, you're more likely to suffer with that for reasons apart from your life experience, et cetera.
Okay. Now, there has been the opinion that sane people or sane women do not kill their children. How do you feel about that opinion?
I don't think there's any basis in reality for that opinion, and I've never seen that opinion written in the professional literature. I've never read a book, I've never read a journal article where an authority, someone with reasonable credentials, opined that anyone who kills a child must be insane, must be so mentally ill that he or she doesn't know what he or she is doing, or doesn't know what he or she is doing is wrong.
Okay. Based on your review of the materials you were provided, your interview with the defendant, did you form an opinion as to the defendant's sanity at the time of the crime?
I did.
And what is your opinion of that?
I would acknowledge that ultimately judges and juries decide who is guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity. But if asked, I would recommend an adjudication of sanity in this case.
Okay. And specifically in reference to whether the defendant knew what she was doing or understood the consequences of her actions, what is your opinion on that?
I believe that while at and around the time of the offenses, Ms. Schenecker was experiencing symptoms of mental illness, that's the first requirement, I believe she nonetheless knew what she was doing and knew that what she was doing was wrong.
Okay. And what facts or evidence do you point to that helps you, that you believe supports your opinion?
Well, she explicitly bought the gun and misled the gun shop owner as to the purpose of the purchase. Now, even if the purchase of the gun was simply to kill herself initially, and she knew she was killing herself, she reported to others that she formed the intent to kill herself later. The journal writings indicated that she intended to kill herself and kill her children. Not only that, the journal writings indicated that she believed that after the children were dead, after she and the children were dead, they would go to heaven, which suggests, right, you don't go to heaven, and people who believe in heaven believe that you don't go there until you die. She made reference to planning to kill her children and developing a plan that would allow it to be carried out. So, for example, she wrote in the journal, well, I think I'll shoot Calyx first, and then I'll kill Bo, and I'll do it in the middle of the night so that, they won't know what's going on. She also talked about what should happen to them after they were dead in terms of notifying other individuals, as well as apparently she wrote a do not resuscitate, don't save me. Again, which suggests she knew that she was taking actions designed to kill herself and kill her children. And then further in the journal, she reflects about having killed the children. Furthermore, she talked to her attorney, that was audio video recorded. She talked to her attorney and acknowledged killing the children. So in the day after the offense, she referenced it. When she talked to officers on the scene, she talked about what she had done. And when interrogated by officers, she talked about shooting the children. So that she didn't know what she did or what she was doing, I think, is contraindicated by her statements to me, her statements to the gun shop owner, her statements to her attorney, her statements to officers on the scene, and her statements to interrogating officers, as well as her statements to jail medical staff who got her after she was released from the hospital. She went to the hospital because of some overdose issues, came to the jail, and shortly thereafter told the jail officers she had shot her children. So that she didn't know what she was doing, I think I don't see support for that. I see support for that she did know what she was doing. Also, journal references to her feeling horrible about what she was doing also demonstrates a reflection and appreciation of what she was doing.
Okay, how about the notes that she left on the door? How do those indicate to you anything about whether she understood the consequences of her actions?
Yeah, now here's a point of conflict that I want to be clear about. My understanding is there was a note on the front door of the house to the carpool suggesting that the family was in New York. So that's why they weren't at home. But in reality, of course, they weren't in New York. The children were dead, and Ms. Schenecker was there in the house. Ms. Schenecker reported to me having no memory for having written that note. That's contrary to what she told Dr. Myers, at least according to what Dr. Myers wrote. Dr. Myers wrote that she wrote the note so that they would not be discovered by others, but rather would be discovered by her husband. So the fact that she was contemplating, according to the report of Dr. Myers, being discovered, the bodies being discovered, reflects an appreciation of what was done.
Okay. And in her journal, she wrote, made references to heaven, and she was going to go home, and going to go home to the Lord. Do you have an opinion about those writings?
Yeah, if I didn't say it, it was an oversight. Her references to going to heaven, to going to the Lord with at least calyx, if not bow, I'm sorry, with at least bow, if not calyx as well, I think reflects an appreciation of death, right? Because those of us who believe in heaven believe that you don't go until you die.
Okay. Now, in the taped interview with law enforcement, did you see signs or evidence that the defendant knew what she had done?
Yes.
And can you indicate to the jury what those statements were that you said you believe support that she understood the consequences of her actions?
She reported that she shot her daughter. Okay, so she, when interrogated by officers, she, less than 24 hours after the offenses, she demonstrated knowledge of what she had done. She reported feeling horrible. That's the word she used, horrible, which I think reflects an appreciation of what she had done. She shared with officers that she thought her husband would be upset when he learned what had occurred. She told the officers that the murders were the worst thing she had ever done, which I think reflects an understanding of what she had done. She told the officers that she bought the gun to kill herself and kill the children, which I believe reflects an appreciation of what she was doing and what she had done.
Okay. Did she express any emotion in that interview that she had towards the children?
She did express that Calyx was oppositional and difficult, and she had concerns that Bo was getting that way too, but I didn't see those comments as directly reflecting that she knew what she had done. That maybe why, but not that she knew what she had done.
Okay. And were there facts or pieces of evidence that you see that show that she understood the wrongfulness of what she had done?
Yeah. She indicated that in her journal, what she had written over multiple periods, she expressed worry that she might wake her son when first shooting her daughter, right? So from that I inferred that she thought, if Bo knows I killed Calyx, he'll take some action to prevent it, right? Because Bo wouldn't want me to kill his sister, nor would Bo want me to kill him. So she recognized that. I think comments made during her interrogation indicating that she felt horrible reflects some knowledge of the wrongfulness of that in some way. Her comment that she thought her husband would become very upset about learning it. Her description of the murders being the worst thing she had ever done reflects knowledge of wrongfulness, and that she apologized to her children for her actions suggests a transgression, right? When do we apologize? When we do something wrong. She also offered comments to the police who were called to the scene. When she was talking to the police who got called to the scene, she referenced her husband. The language she used was her husband would be pissed off. And then what I found very compelling was in the videotaped interview with her attorney, the day after, I'm sorry, within a day or two after the offenses. She's in the hospital. She's being interviewed by her attorney. She shares that she did not tell anyone else.
Nice to approach. A moment.
Saw that was performed with the defendant at Tampa General Hospital. That was an interview by Dr. Solomon. Is that accurate?
I believe Dr. Solomon was there. I believe her attorney was there as well. I can't remember. I don't remember who asked, if only one person asked the question or multiple people asked questions.
Okay. But let's go back to the notebook. Did you see any other, what about the fact that she wrote that she was going to do a Saturday massacre?
Well, I think that suggests planning and intent and a knowledge, certainly a knowledge of what she was doing, and arguably, although I admit it's an inference, knowledge of the wrongfulness. I think the word massacre, I think we would, typically, I think it suggests an appreciation of wrongfulness, the word massacre in and of itself.
Okay. And in the journal, she also wrote a phrase, I think it was in parentheses, that the evil starts Thursday.
Right.
What is your opinion about that phrase?
Well, if that's reference to the murder of the children, describing something as evil arguably suggests that it's wrong.
Yes, sir.
What is your opinion about the phrase that she wrote, the evil starts Thursday?
It's my opinion, and I infer knowledge of wrongfulness based on the use of the word evil.
Okay. And going to the interview with the police, what is your opinion of her statement saying, basically, I don't want to go to jail?
That could mean many things. So I don't know if I have an opinion about what that may or may not mean.
Okay. And you indicated that you reviewed the videotape at the Tampa General Hospital.
Right.
Okay. And specifically, there was a phrase in there where she was talking about whether she told the plan to kill the children to Dr. Obregon. What is your memory of that response?
My memory of the response is that she shared with those in the room where she was being interviewed that she didn't tell anyone about her intent to kill her children because they would have prevented it, which suggests, in my opinion, an understanding or appreciation of the wrongfulness of what she intended to do, and ultimately did.
And in that interview at the Tampa General Hospital, she also indicated that it was horrible, horrible to see her babies like that. What is your opinion of that statement?
That she described seeing her children as horrible, I think reflected, in my opinion, reflected an appreciation of the wrongfulness and regret. Immediately after that, she expressed regret, saying that if she had to do it over, she wished she had just killed herself and hadn't killed her children.
And is it your opinion that the defendant knew that she was killing her children?
Yes,
Okay. Based on what we've talked about already?
correct.
And ultimately, based on everything that you've testified here today, is it your opinion that the defendant was sane at the time that she killed her children?
If asked to offer that opinion on that verdict, I would say yes.
We would pass the witness. Thank you, doctor.
Cross-examined. Before you start, can I do one stuff up this? The main part.
Good morning, Doctor.
Morning, Mr. Trainer.
Dr. Otto, before I ask you further questions, I want to make sure I understood some of your earlier testimony. You said, did you not, sir, that somebody can be psychotic and still be sane?
In my opinion, yes.
They can be mentally ill and still be sane.
In my opinion, yes.
They can be suicidal and still be sane.
Yes,
And they can be delusional and still be sane.
correct.
Isn't it true, sir, that one can feel bad about what one may have done and still be considered sane?
Certainly.
isn't it equally true that one could feel bad about what one has done and could be insane?
Yes.
One could feel good about what one has done and be considered sane.
Yes.
One could feel good about what one has done and still be considered insane.
Yes.
In fact, to push it to an extreme, one could feel horrible about what one has done and be considered, in your opinion, to be sane.
Yes.
One could feel horrible about what one has done and be considered insane.
Yes.
One could be very, very upset about what one has done and be considered sane, in your opinion. Is that correct?
Yes.
And one could be very, very upset and, in your opinion, still be considered to be insane.
Certainly.
And the nuances of these expressed feelings would be for you to decide based on your examination of the patient, your review of documents such as the ones you described for us earlier today, your assessment of the overall picture, correct?
Yes.
You make those decisions not having prejudged before you enter into the evaluation process, depending on who hired you, but based on what you see when you review all the documents or videos or journals, and then go conduct all the interviews that you feel are sufficient in order to make your evaluation. Would that be an accurate assessment, sir?
Yes.
So it would not, therefore, be correct for anybody to assume that somebody could be automatically sane despite psychosis. They could be sane or insane, correct?
Correct.
They could be sane or insane if somebody's mentally ill.
Yes.
Suicidal and delusional, same thing, sane or insane.
Yes.
That's for the person that's trying to make the evaluation to try to decide based on training experience, based on evaluations, based on review of documents.
Or the judge and jury, yes.
Well, in this case, we're asking you to start out with.
Right. Yeah. Or the judge and jury, yeah. Yeah.
Now, Dr. Otto, you made mention of a number of documents that you received in this situation to review, and I'm not going to ask you to go over all of them, but it appeared that you had reviewed 20 or more documents. In fact, if you include all the separate depositions that you reviewed, I'm sure the number was even higher. Would that be accurate?
That's accurate.
And you made your first contact with Ms. Schenecker on March the 12th of 2013, correct?
Right.
That was a full 2 years and a couple of months almost from the time of the incident that is the subject of this trial, correct?
Right.
And I ask you this, are you aware, sir, of the type of medications? I know you mentioned earlier, in fact, strike the beginning of that question, I'll try to make it easier, simpler. One of the things you made mention of as a review of documents is you made mention of the fact that you considered jail records, including jail medical records, correct?
Yes.
So you did take a look at the medical records from the jail, the ones that they generate, what medications people are taking, and that type of thing?
Yes.
And it would be accurate to say, sir, would it not, that by the time you saw Ms. Schenecker on March the 12th, 2013, and in your subsequent visits, she was receiving medication from the jail,
That's
correct?
right.
In fact, these medications were designed to deal with her depression, correct?
Yes.
They were designed to deal with any type of mental illness that she had, including her bipolar disorder, correct?
Correct.
So she would be receiving antipsychotic medication at the time of your visit, just as much as any other type of medication, correct?
I don't think she was receiving antipsychotic medication. I thought she was receiving antidepressant, anti-anxiety, and mood-stabilizing medications.
Mood stabilizing medication, sir, would have the effect of trying to balance her out, make her able to appreciate conversations and to be able to communicate with people and maybe balance out her feelings and emotions. Would that be correct?
Stabilize her mood, right.
And all these medications that she was receiving on March the 12th, 2013, over 2 years after the incident, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you made mention earlier in your testimony that you had some disdain in this type of situation, and that's my word, and I'll use a different one if you want me to. You didn't think that conducting testing would be beneficial. You said it might be helpful, but it wouldn't be necessary in a case like this because the incident happened so long ago, and you felt that the testing would simply reveal the mental status of the patient at that moment that you were testing her, correct?
Primarily, yes.
Okay, and you said it could be helpful, but it wasn't necessary, correct?
Correct.
By the same token, and I think that was a reflection, and I will ask you point blank, was that, sir, not a reflection of your feeling that over 2 years would have gone by from the time of the incident to the time when you conducted your evaluation? Therefore, such testing that would tell you how Ms. Schenecker was on March the 12th, 2013, wouldn't help you decide what her state of mind was back on January the 27th, 2011,
I
correct?
think it was necessary, right.
Okay. And by the same token, I take it and would suggest to you, sir, would you agree that there is some possibility that talking to somebody over 2 years after an incident could also result in some information that might not be entirely accurate?
Certainly.
In fact, people's memory could be perhaps diminished of an event that happened over 2 years ago. Wouldn't that be possible, sir?
Certainly.
The mind frame of the person that you're speaking to, based on the type of medication they're receiving or the environment they're in, that could adjust what they might be able to tell you. Would that not be accurate?
Certainly.
And these types of issues, I take it you would take into consideration by virtue of trying to examine not only what you learned from Ms. Schenecker, but also what you learned from the review of the records. That's where that plays in?
That's one of the advantages of not simply talking to the defendant, right?
Right, and so that's why you have all these other sources of information. You go and look at the police reports to find out what the police say. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And is it true you would also look at the depositions of the statements that were given by officers or by witnesses in the incident just to find out what they thought at the time?
I did that.
And it would also be important to you to find out what type of medical records existed for Ms. Schenecker from her history?
I had them.
And you reviewed all of these, right?
Yes.
Same thing with her mental health history, correct?
I don't mean to suggest there may be things I wasn't provided that I did not review. I reviewed a lot of medical records.
You reviewed a lot of medical records, whatever you were provided?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I just don't mean to suggest, I don't know if they're comprehensive, right? I would never know that.
Okay, the
But
ones
a lot
you
of
got,
records.
you reviewed?
Yes.
And same thing with the mental health records. Whatever you received as far as mental health records pertaining to Ms. Schenecker, you reviewed them?
Yes.
And whatever Tampa General records you received, you reviewed them?
I did.
And you looked at the video that you've been mentioning where Dr. Solomon was interviewing our client, correct?
I did.
And you had a chance to, did you listen to the tape of the interview conducted by Detectives Previch and Sandell, or did you just look at a transcript of it?
In my notes here, I have that I reviewed a transcript. I don't remember if there was made available or I reviewed a video recording.
You feel, however, sir, that you certainly understand the substance of that interview, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you're able to use that to rely upon in terms of formulating an opinion?
Yes.
You mentioned that you were able to consider the depositions of some of the other doctors, and I think you mentioned them by name. Did you consider the reports of the other doctors? For example, did you consider Dr. Taylor's report, sir?
I was not provided it.
Did you consider Dr. Stein's report?
I was not provided that report.
Did you consider any report by Dr. Myers?
I don't think he wrote a report. I received what he described as case notes.
Did you consider depositions of Dr. Myers or Dr. Mayer?
I was provided with the deposition of Dr. Mayer. I was not provided with the deposition of Dr. Myers.
And what about Dr. Solomon? Did you consider a report made by Dr. Solomon, sir?
I saw no report she authored.
Did you have available to you, was a deposition of Dr. Solomon given to you for you to review?
I reviewed her deposition.
You also made mention of the fact that you considered a journal, which I think you've been referring to this morning,
That's
correct?
the word I used for it, right, written by Ms. Schenecker.
Okay, and I think you also mentioned that you considered some email traffic that was going on between parties that were involved in this case, correct?
That too.
Okay. And you made mention of several depositions involved in the case, and I don't know if you listed all the witnesses, but I take it they were people that had been deposed that may have been first responders, police officers, people of those nature?
Among others, yes.
Okay. And so you have these documents and these sources available to you prior to the completion of your report, but I take it from your earlier testimony you didn't have all of them available to you prior to your first visit with Ms. Schenecker, correct?
That's correct.
And when you go there on March the 12th, 2013, do you take it upon yourself at that point, sir, to go to see the jail and immediately learn at that time what kind of medication she's taking at that particular day?
No.
Do you, at some point in time before the finish of your 5 interviews with my client, take it upon yourself to learn what the jail has been doing insofar as medication of Ms. Schenecker?
Well, I had the jail medical records, and I also asked Ms. Schenecker herself.
And again, for purposes of accuracy, when you're talking about a person that has bipolar disorder or any type of mental illness, wouldn't it be safer to go directly to the entity that's supplying the medication to make sure you know what it is, correct? And you did that.
Well, I didn't go to the jail I didn't go to the infirmary. I had records provided.
Okay, well, exactly. You consulted with them, whether it be in person or had them send them to you.
Yeah.
But you did have a chance to look at the records of the medication.
Yes.
And what you find, sir, if I could state it simply, your initial meeting with Ms. Schenecker was a meeting with a woman that had already been diagnosed with bipolar disorder by other doctors before you, correct?
Certainly.
So she was a person that had a long-standing and serious mental health condition before you had a chance to interview her, correct?
That was established long before I ever saw her, right?
And this is a condition that had been described and diagnosed from perhaps years earlier, dating back into the middle of the 2000s. Would that be accurate, sir?
I think first diagnosed in 2001 at the National Institutes of Health.
So you're not, at this point, trying to make a determination. When you first interview Ms. Schenecker, you're not, sir, trying to make a determination of a diagnosis just yet. You're just trying to get acquainted with her in your initial meetings with her. And as you said earlier, I believe, try to establish some rapport, try to meet with her and talk with her in the hopes that she'll talk with you as well, correct?
Yeah, my first session was devoted solely to learning about her history and background. We didn't talk in any meaningful way about the events that led to her arrest.
In terms of Ms. Schenecker's long history, mental health history, I take it that you also had, and I didn't mention these earlier, but military records pertaining to Ms. Schenecker?
History of her mental health treatment in the military.
And that would include the National Institute of Mental Health that you referred to just a moment ago?
It was the National Institute of Health, not the National Institute of Mental Health. And I don't believe that has a military affiliation, but I did have that record too.
You had that record as well?
Yes.
You also had information from the University of South Florida where she had received treatment from Dr. Obregon and the other people over there?
Correct.
Ms. Schenecker was a person who had often considered suicide, correct?
That's what she said. She said she considered it repeatedly.
In fact, the medical records you consulted or the mental health records you consulted were replete with mention of that as well, correct?
I believe there was reference to suicidal ideation, yes, thoughts of suicide.
So again, this is not something that just came up in January of 2011 for the very first time, correct?
I don't think so at all, no. I agree with you.
This is a person that's very, very disturbed for a long number of years and had considered on a number of occasions taking her own life, correct?
I agree with that.
She was a person who had not taken action towards that end up to that point, but it was a situation which could be seen easily by examination of the records or simply by talking to her, correct?
Yes.
In a situation like that, where you have somebody that's suicidal, do you take any special circumstances or special measures in order to conduct an interview of such a person? Do you try to avoid that subject or do you try to head on?
No, if you have concerns about someone's risk for suicide, I think there's general consensus that you would address that risk with them. The idea that if you talk about it, they'll do it, there's no meaningful basis for such an assumption, and you want to inquire, and if there is an acute concern, respond accordingly.
So that was not a subject that you shied away from. You discussed that with Ms. Schenecker.
We talked about her thoughts of suicide, yes.
And in terms of her other aspects of mental illness, I take it that you were able to find out that she suffered from severe depression for many, many years as well?
She reported it, and it was referenced in the records.
So now you have an extra issue thrown in, and perhaps connected, but a person that's been suicidal a number of times over the course of many years, that's also suffering from great depression over the course of many years, correct?
Many depressed people are suicidal, and so they sometimes go hand in glove, but not all depressed people think about suicide. But yeah, so it's maybe you consider the depression, you might want to consider the depression more severe if there's active and repeated thoughts of suicide, sure.
In fact, in terms of the depression, if not the suicide thoughts, suicidal ideation, in terms of the depression, Ms. Schenecker had actually been receiving medication for a number of years to try to combat the depression, correct?
Yes, I believe a 20-year history of treatment.
20 years worth of medication to fight depression, and it never went away, did it?
I'm not aware of times where she was absolutely clear and high functioning.
Well, in fact, as you said earlier, she's still to this day receiving medication that are mood stabilizers from the jail, correct?
Correct.
So my question to you, would it be accurate to say, sir, that people that have mental illness don't always get better?
Certainly.
Sometimes in a perfect scenario, the doctors are able to find the right medication, find the right combination of medications, and cause somebody to feel so much better that it can be said that they're relieved of their symptoms or relieved of their condition, but it couldn't be said that that person was completely better 100% forever and ever, correct?
I think that's accurate, yes. It's hard to imagine, other than some very rare events, that we consider someone cured. Yes.
Right. Unfortunately.
Yes.
But you have people that are mentally ill, and in this case, Ms. Schenecker was mentally ill for many, many years, and no one was ever able to stop that from being the case, correct?
I agree.
So you get into a situation where we're now dealing with a tragic event that took place in 2011, and it involves a woman who's been severely mentally ill for 20 years. And that's what you're asked to come along afterwards and try to evaluate what was going on in her mind at the time of this incident, correct?
It's correct.
That was your mandate. That was your mission. That's what you were retained to do, correct?
Correct.
And you found Ms. Schenecker to be serious and cooperative, correct?
Yes.
You found that she was able to express herself, although you did make mention of the fact that she was tangential in some instances where you would ask her about one thing and she might go a different direction at it or maybe go to the side of it, correct?
That's correct.
And you felt that she sometimes experienced lack of memory, correct?
She reported that.
And you didn't have any reason to doubt that, correct? Since she had been expressive with you in the past, in your interviews and cooperative?
Well, a couple things. Certainly at the time she reported it, I had no doubts because I saw her as generally cooperative. I want to elucidate a couple ways. One, it's not uncommon for people who were charged with crimes to report a limited memory for their behavior at and around the time of the offense, and sometimes it's not always a true reflection of their memory. That shouldn't surprise anyone. Secondly, that she reported, for example, I later learned, to Dr. Myers a memory for things that I expressly asked her about, raised some questions about, her report of it could be truly she didn't remember when she talked to me, but she remembered when she talked to Dr. Myers, or it could be she remembered and didn't want to talk about it. I don't know which way that went.
Well, and that's exactly what my point is. You have no conception of exactly what it is, do you?
It could be a genuine memory impairment, or it could be her not wanting to talk about what I asked her about.
Dr. Otto, I'm sorry, go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Either or.
Dr. Otto, we are talking now about a woman who's severely mentally ill for a long, long period of time. Mm-hmm. Isn't it just possible that if she experiences memory loss about an incident that took place over 2 years earlier before you got a chance to speak to her, isn't it just possible that that's legitimate memory loss and not some attempt to fool somebody or mislead somebody? Isn't that possible?
it's possible, it's certainly possible, that's why I said either or, but I'll point out that she talked with Dr. Myers not on the day, to reference this discrepancy with Dr. Myers, she didn't talk with Dr. Myers on the day of the offense or the day thereafter. She talked with him months and literally years after the offense.
So what you're referring to,
And that's
sir-
when her memory, she reported that memory.
So what you're referring to, sir, is that different accounts possibly were given to different mental health experts that talked to her at different times, all subsequent to the time of the incident, correct?
That absolutely happened, yes.
And in a situation like that, I take it you're not able to say with any clarity whether or not the information she gave you on that particular day or gave another doctor on another particular day is accurate, which is the necessity to go back and look at the records that you have and talk to whoever you can talk to, like Parker Schenecker, for example, or go back and look at the police reports, look at the interviews, those kind of things, correct?
Right.
And again, so that there's no implication of some sinisterness, if that's a word, in this situation, isn't it just possible that because of mental illness and because of time going by and because of being inundated, submerged with many mental health experts, interviewing somebody many times, isn't it just possible that somebody gives different answers from time to time?
Certainly.
Without attaching some type of manipulative intention involved in it, correct?
Certainly.
Especially in a situation where you're talking about somebody that has a 20-year history of mental illness, severe mental illness, correct?
Yes.
You met with Ms. Schenecker 5 times, and you spread that out. It was 14 and a half hours, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I am, that this started in March of 2013 and extended until your final visit, which was January of 2014, correct?
That's correct.
So you yourself, in your visits with Ms. Schenecker, your evaluations of Ms. Schenecker, occupied some time with her in 5 different occasions spread out over 10 months, correct? You didn't go see her today, I'll be back tomorrow, I'll be back the next day until we get this finished kind of thing. You had to take care of looking at some records and you wanted to let things sit for a while before you made your report, correct?
5 times over 10 months.
Okay, so you have, even you, without regard for any of the other doctors that you've mentioned or any of the other doctors that might testify in this proceeding, just you yourself had 5 different visits spread out over 10 months with Ms. Schenecker at a time period that was at least 2 years and 2 months removed from the date of the incident, correct?
And longer, right, yeah.
And longer.
At least 2 years and 2 months.
Good point,
right.
and longer. You set out to talk to her, and I think you said it well earlier in your testimony. You said, well, if you want to find out what's going on, go ask somebody. Well, that's the person to ask, right? So that would be the starting point to try to find out what her mental status was at the time of the incident, correct?
I actually don't think that's the starting point, but that's a good point. I certainly had knowledge about the offenses and her behavior before I ever talked to her as a result of the records provided by the prosecutor. And when I teach mental health professionals about how to do these evaluations, I recommend that before you go in to talk to a defendant about how they were thinking, feeling, and behaving at and around the time of the offense, that you do review the arrest report so you have some knowledge yourself about what may have occurred.
And that's what you did here.
Yes.
And you had available materials that you could look at, and you looked at them.
Yeah.
Did homework before going in there. You didn't want to just go in without having looked at anything before speaking to the client, right?
Certainly. And then, just to be real clear, and then some of those materials I reviewed after I spoke with her and maybe before the next time or the third time I talked to her, et cetera.
And ultimately, from the 5 visits and from all the documents that you looked at, applying what you learned in all those situations, you have developed an opinion regarding Ms. Schenecker's state of mind at the time of this incident, correct?
Correct.
Now, in terms of the creation of an opinion by a mental health expert, isn't it true, sir, or would you agree with me, that such an opinion is dependent to some large extent on what you hear from other people, including, in this case, Ms. Schenecker, including what you learn from the transcripts you read? It certainly isn't something you can say with total clarity that came as a result of you observing it yourself, correct?
Right. My opinion is based on the data I was provided and gathered.
So if you by any chance have data that's been given to you that might be incorrect, that would distort your opinion.
It could.
If you have data that's given to you that's misinterpreted or misunderstood as to how it was actually meant, that could possibly distort your opinion too, correct?
It could.
And I take it that mental health professionals, unlike attorneys, are not perfect, and they make mistakes every once in a while in terms of their interpretation of information.
I don't know how I could say otherwise.
So, and to guard against that, that's the purpose of going through all the steps that you've mentioned today to make a good faith effort and to be a professional, to go look at everything that you have available to you in a serious situation like this, correct?
Yes.
And yet, you would agree with me, sir, or would you agree with me that still there is some room for interpretation regarding a snippet of information or a snippet of a quote or a snippet of a line of a police report or something of that nature, how you might interpret it, correct?
I agree.
You relied heavily in the formation of your opinion on the information that you got from Ms. Schenecker, and I noticed also a lot of entries in your opinion that came as a result of your review of the police report that, or the portion of the police report that dealt with the statement that my client gave to police authorities right after the incident, January 28th at noon.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You made mention of one other thing before I start asking you about that, and I want to get clarification on that. You indicated that there is no authority that's out there that specifically says that sane women do not kill their children, correct?
I don't believe that's what I testified to. I believe I testified to the fact that I'm not aware of a credible authority that says you'd have to be insane to kill your children, which I think is kind of the contrary of what you just offered. But
maybe, yeah. Maybe I even misspoke. But say that again. Just exactly as you said it.
What I will offer, and what I think I previously offered, is I'm not aware of any credible professional authority that says essentially every person who kills his or her children is insane.
Now, you are, sir, from your years and years of experience as a mental health professional, aware that there is a very strong bond that is created between a parent and a child, correct?
Yes.
In fact, you are aware that a very, very strong bond exists between a mother and children that she bore herself, correct?
I'm aware of that.
In a situation like that, although there's no suggestion that there's some legal authority that says one must be insane to have killed their own children, you would agree with me that it would take quite an undertaking for that bond to be broken?
Well, let me just say this. People neglect and abandon their children all the time. Arguably, that's a breaking of the parental bond. Now, killing children, I acknowledge, is qualitatively different than neglecting them, giving them up, not taking responsibility for them. But parental bonds are broken sometimes in the absence of mental illness.
I understand. Now, doctor, it's true, is it not, that you didn't uncover any evidence of any kind in the records that you reviewed of any kind of breaking of this bond earlier? By all accounts, Ms. Schenecker was a very good mother, correct?
Ms. Schenecker was a devoted and caring mother whose parenting abilities were compromised by her mental illness, and when she was mentally ill, she wasn't as good a mother as she was otherwise.
And you never heard any comments that she didn't love her children, did you?
I never heard that, no. You're correct.
In fact, you interviewed Parker Schenecker, and you also looked at all the reports that you've cited, and she loved her children, didn't she?
Yes, Mr. Schenecker described his ex-wife as a good and caring mother when not mentally ill, when not experiencing severe symptoms.
Can it be concluded, sir, by you as a mental health professional in terms of your evaluation before making an opinion in this situation, could you could you come to the conclusion, would you not agree with me, sir, that this never would have happened but for the mental illness of Ms. Schenecker?
I don't know if I can say that because of the other issues involved, substance abuse and things like that. I think certainly if she wasn't mentally ill, this was much less likely to have happened, yes.
You can't quite go as far as to say it wouldn't have happened, but much less likely, correct?
Yes.
You drew attention earlier in your testimony to the purchase of a gun, and you indicated that the purchase of the gun indicated to you a knowledge of what was going to happen, correct?
Yes, I thought it reflected knowledge of what she was doing or intending to do, essentially.
And you made a reference to the writings in the journal regarding references to the children going to heaven. I believe you mentioned that heaven can only be attained after death. Therefore, again, that was an indication to you that Ms. Schenecker had knowledge of what it was that she had done, correct?
Yes.
You made reference to having uncovered in your interviews, as well as your review of the records, some sort of plan regarding which child might be shot first and which child might not be shot first. You indicated again, sir, if I'm not mistaken, that was an indication to you of knowledge of the event, correct?
And its wrongfulness, yes.
In terms of knowledge of the event, excuse me, strike that. In terms of the order of the children being established in the mind of Ms. Schenecker, your feeling about that is simply that it establishes wrongfulness because someone could presume that the other child would have reacted to the noise? Is that the basis of that opinion by you?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Okay. And isn't it equally true, sir, that in terms of Ms. Schenecker's preparation or in terms of her idea of how to best accomplish getting her children to heaven in this misguided event, isn't it true that that could have just been a reflection of how she happened to conduct herself? In other words, again, another intent, another knowledge, another piece of information that indicated knowledge of the event, but not necessarily wrongfulness.
I just don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
It probably wasn't such a good question. Let me try again. In terms of the order of the children, in terms of your feeling that the order of the children establishes some kind of understanding of wrongfulness, isn't it true, sir, that it would simply be another piece of information that would go towards knowledge of the situation?
I think it certainly reflects knowledge of the situation.
And sir, in terms of wrongfulness, if someone, in this case Ms. Schenecker, had the mentality, the thought in her mind that she was actually going to accomplish this suicide of herself and this actually triple suicide, I think it was referred to at some point in the record, she was going to take all three of them to heaven. Again, if she's looking at it from that standpoint, isn't it true, sir, that it wouldn't be wrongful to her to accomplish that? Now, and I'm not asking as a citizen of whether it's right or wrong to go shoot somebody. I'm saying if somebody has that mentality that they are trying to take these three people to heaven together, isn't it possible, sir, that it wasn't wrongful to her?
Sure, she could have believed that it was a wonderful thing to do. I mean, people do all kinds of bad things that they think are right. Yes.
Well, and typically, sir, the people that do bad things typically aren't people that have mental illness for 20 years, correct? The criminal justice system is full of people that commit offenses against the law on an everyday basis, correct?
It is.
And not all those people have mental illness, correct?
Most don't.
Most don't. And that's what I meant to say before. Maybe I didn't say it so well, but most of those people that come into the criminal justice system do not have mental illness, correct?
Most do not.
And a measure of whether someone is mentally ill might be looked at by their history. In this case, we have 20-year history of Ms. Schenecker, correct?
Certainly.
Antipsychotic medication for many years, correct?
Treatment for mental illness suggests mental illness, right?
In fact, treatment and attempts by all sorts of different doctors in all sorts of different places to try to get her well that never succeeded, correct?
Oh, yes, I don't dispute her mental illness.
So if one is analyzing what is going through the mind of such a person, what's going through the mind of such a person might be affected by the mental illness, correct?
Oh, most probably will be, yes.
And so, again, the order of this event might not necessarily dictate that there was a knowledge of wrongfulness, that there was an understanding of wrongfulness, correct?
Yes, I inferred that because she wrote that she would kill her daughter first, and she had concerns about waking Bo. I inferred that it suggested I inferred that she believed Bo might intervene, suggesting wrongfulness. But that is an inference by me, absolutely. And there could be other reasons for her writing that she wanted to shoot her daughter first, yes.
You took note of the interview that Detectives Sandell and Previch conducted of Ms. Schenecker.
I did.
And in that interview, she made several admissions, and I am going to presume that you took note of those admissions. In fact, you made mention of the fact that she told the detectives she shot her daughter and then shot her son. So certainly that would be central to your position, that would indicate that she certainly had knowledge of what she had done, correct?
Correct.
In that interview, she referred on a number of occasions to her children being alive, referred to them in present tense.
I noted that in my report. Yes, she did.
In a situation like that, and again, I'm asking you as a mental health professional to understand the basis of my question. With a person that has a mental illness that extends back 20 years and all the medication and treatment that has been given to her in attempts to get her well unsuccessfully, isn't it possible, sir, that she could very well have not known those children were dead at that time, even though she herself is the person that shot them and killed them?
You're asking me if it's possible.
I am.
She didn't. Yes, it's possible.
And in terms of that assessment, isn't it true that to fully understand exactly what's in her mind would be impossible? She's a mentally ill person, correct?
She is.
And she's made a statement to the police. Certainly, strike the last question. I'll ask you point blank this. Isn't it true, sir, that you as well as the police would rely as fact on the basis, on the statement that Ms. Schenecker made that she shot her son?
I relied on that statement.
Isn't it true that you, and probably as well as the police, relied on Ms. Schenecker's statement that she shot her daughter?
I relied on that statement.
And sir, isn't it true that it's equally possible that if those statements are accurate as to what Ms. Schenecker's response to the situation is at that time, isn't it true, sir, that it's also possibly accurate that she doesn't even, in her mind, even understand that those children are dead at that time?
Okay. You started the question by saying equally possible, and then you said, isn't it possible?
Well,
so I don't know which one you want me to answer.
Let's try possible.
Possible. Possible, yes.
You don't like equally possible?
Well, I don't dislike it or like it. I just think I'll give you a different answer.
But it is possible that that was her mindset at the time of that interview, correct? That those children were still alive.
It's possible.
As strange as that may sound, as improbable or as delusional or impossible as that may sound, it's possible, isn't it?
It's possible.
There was some testimony you provided earlier, and I actually acted to expand that testimony when I was asking you about how one's feelings might dictate or suggest sanity or insanity. That's what we were talking about, somebody feeling horrible or feeling bad or feeling good or feeling upset, that type of thing. Constantly in the course of your interviews with Ms. Schenecker, and constantly in terms of her demeanor as well as her comments to the police when they were interviewing her back on January 28, 2011, Ms. Schenecker expressed remorse, correct?
She certainly expressed remorse to me consistently and regret.
And she felt bad about it. She expressed regret. She felt horrible about this. In fact, at some point, I think she said, "I felt horrible," correct?
I don't know if she used the word horrible with me, but without a doubt, every time we talked, she expressed regret and remorse about killing her children.
She made reference to the fact that that was the worst thing that she has ever done, correct?
Yes.
And at one point, she said, like to make an apology to the children, correct? She made that reference in an interview with you?
I have in my note, yeah, apologize to the children, yes.
Now, again, looking at it from the frame of reference of a person that's got mental illness, doctor, isn't it possible that these expressions are honest?
It's possible they're honest, yes.
So it's possible that she did feel upset and horrible.
Yes,
It's possible that she did feel remorseful.
yes,
It's possible that if she had it to do again, she may not do it. She said that to you too, right?
yes.
It's possible that she would like to extend apology to the children if she ever was able to speak to them, correct?
That's right.
You take all those as being possible and possibly an indication of what her mindset is about that after the fact of this incident, correct?
I'm sorry, I lost you on that
Well, you don't
question.
believe she was lying to you when she said those things, correct?
Oh, no, I truly believe that Ms. Schenecker terribly regrets and is remorseful about shooting her children.
So you take it that that's an accurate representation of how she feels about those things after the fact. In other words, when you're
Yeah,
talking to her.
as I talk to her, right.
Isn't it possible, sir, that somebody that has that depth of feeling and that depth of emotion regarding her children could also have felt the same way at the time of the incident?
That she was remorseful as she killed them?
Yeah.
I guess, yes. That's possible.
Even as,
I don't guess. It is possible.
okay, and feel horrible having done something like that, even if it's just a moment after the incident, correct? That's possible.
Certainly.
It's possible that she felt upset at the time, correct?
Yes.
Even by her standard of what upset is, because again, she's a person that's been, it's a long time mentally ill person, correct?
Yeah, I don't think you need the mental illness for all of this, but certainly, yes.
Well,
No, I'm saying, I meant to say that a non-mentally ill person can do something and then immediately regret it as well.
isn't it possible, sir, that a person expressing sorrow and regret and remorse could certainly be suggesting that they think what they did was wrong?
Certainly, yeah, that's my point, yes.
Well, and I understand your point, and my question to you, sir, isn't it equally possible, or isn't it possible? Let's start out with possible, since you don't like equally as much. Isn't it possible, sir, that an expression of those thoughts and feelings about those children is not necessarily an indication that she understands the wrongfulness of her act, but simply an understanding that it happened? Isn't that possible, sir?
Certainly, someone could say, I feel terribly about it, it was the absolute right thing to do, and I was justified in doing it, but I feel horrible having had done it.
Well, isn't
And
it
that
true,
had to
sir?
be done.
Isn't it true, sir, that oftentimes in everyday society, people say, I've got to do this. I really don't want to do this. I've got to do this. I don't feel good about it, but I've got to do it, right?
In all kinds of contexts.
In all kinds of contexts. And I again, would ask you, isn't it possible that that was the context in which Ms. Schenecker made those statements? In other words, she did something that she felt necessary to do and then felt bad about it afterwards, correct? Isn't that possible?
It's possible. I don't see it in this case, but I can't deny the possibility. I don't think all the evidence gets to that, but I don't deny the possibility.
Similarly, sir, you made note of the phrase Saturday Massacre. Saturday Massacre speaks for itself in many ways, wouldn't you agree? I mean, the term massacre, that's something that's fairly common, correct?
I'm sorry, it's a common term? I don't know, yes.
But if I'm not mistaken, and maybe I am, but if I'm not mistaken, you had attached the reference to Saturday Massacre as a reference to Ms. Schenecker having known that what she did was wrong.
I inferred knowledge of wrongfulness by use of the word massacre, correct?
And again, by inference.
By definition, I
Isn't it
inferred.
possible that, again, she's referring to something that she's not necessarily going to be happy about or that she even thinks is wrong, but she has to do?
Someone could use the term massacre and think they were fully justified in massacring. I don't deny that possibility.
I would extend this same question to you regarding the other reference that you made, evil starts Thursday. Same thing there. It's a statement that something's going to happen. I don't like it. I wish I wouldn't do it, but that doesn't necessarily tell you, sir, other than by inference perhaps, it doesn't necessarily tell you that Ms. Schenecker, in her mind, thought what she was doing was wrong, correct?
I infer wrongfulness by the use of the word evil, correct. It meant something, a very different belief on her part, but it's possible.
When again, in terms of meaning something that's very different to a person that has a long-standing serious mental illness might be, I suggest to you, different than the meaning that might be attributed to somebody that doesn't have long-term mental illness. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think, I'll disagree that simply because of mental illness, people will interpret the word evil differently. I think people will interpret the word evil or use it however they want. I don't deny that Ms. Schenecker's use of the word evil might have had a different connotation or meaning than how I interpreted it and the inference I drew.
Well, and again, isn't it true, sir, that as a background to all this, we already know that she was a good and loyal mother for many, many years?
Yes.
As you even said, and as you learned from your review, she was a good and loyal mother and she got a little worse. Things got worse for her because of what? Because of the mental illness, correct?
By the symptoms of the mental illness and the substance abuse.
So yes. She was a good and loyal mother. She was somebody that loved her children, correct?
I agree with all that.
So any consideration of what she may or may not have meant by these phrases could be subject to some dispute,
interpretation. And I try to communicate that when I based my opinion on words like evil and massacre, that was an inference I was making. Yes.
Doctor, if someone, in this case, one of the things that you attributed to a suggestion of wrongfulness is that she didn't tell anybody, correct? Or did I misunderstand you? She didn't tell anybody. I think you picked that up from the video from Tampa General where Dr. Solomon was interviewing her.
No. I attached the significance not to the fact that she didn't tell anyone, but why she shared she didn't tell anyone was because she was concerned they would stop her.
And again, and I appreciate the correction, again, my question to you is, isn't it possible, sir, that again, throughout all of this fog, throughout all of this, all of that remark about being afraid that somebody was going to know about it or find out about it or stop her or something, isn't it possible that she felt that she was on a mission to do something that she felt was right, the right thing to do?
Oh, I believe that her statement that she didn't want other people to know because they would thwart her, at a minimum reflects her knowledge that other people thought it was wrong, certainly. And may well reflect that she knew it was wrong, or at least she knew other people thought it was wrong, that they would stop her.
And sir, isn't it true that a consideration of what other people might think is not a consideration of the state of mind of the person that's in question right now today,
Certainly.
correct?
A person could acknowledge, I believe it's right, everyone else thinks it's wrong, or many other people think it's wrong.
In fact,
right?
sir, that's the hallmark of mental illness in some instances, isn't it? Maybe not all
No,
instances, but certainly that would be an expression of some mental illness, correct?
Simply believing differently than the majority is not a hallmark of mental illness, no.
In terms-
Many people with mental illness have delusions, fixed false beliefs, that are kind of hallmarks of mental illness. But believing things that the majority does not believe is not a hallmark of mental illness.
In terms of Ms. Schenecker, Ms. Schenecker's love of her children, her devotion to her children, and then taking their lives, isn't it possible, sir, that she is, in her mind, doing the right thing, as she has said to other doctors? Isn't it possible, sir, that that was what was in her mind, and an inference of wrongfulness is perhaps nothing more than that, an inference? Isn't it possible that she thought in her mind that she was doing the right thing that day?
It is possible.
She made a reference to the fact that it was horrible to see her babies like that. Now, certainly, sir, you reviewed enough records to understand like that, what that meant, and not to go over details, but the children were shot in the head. They were killed, and they were left. One was left in a bed, covered up by a blanket, and the other one was left in the van, covered up by a blanket. And you'd received some dialogue from Ms. Schenecker regarding her conduct towards the children, even after the shooting, correct?
We talked about that, yes.
And she, again, along with an expression of regret and sorrow, she also expressed that it was horrible to see her babies like that, correct?
She did say that.
And again, if that is injected into a consideration of whether or not she felt that she was doing something that was wrong or didn't even understand that it was wrong, that comment in and of itself is not necessarily an indication that she understood that what she did was wrong, is it?
I agree. It goes more towards knowledge of what she did, not the, someone could come upon their children in that state and form the same, and say the same thing. It was horrible to see my children having been shot.
And
who had no responsibility.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't realize you were...
I was trying to suggest that certainly simply saying it was horrible to see your children shot, that in and of itself doesn't provide an indicator of wrongfulness. An innocent party could come upon their children shot and say the very same thing.
Doctor, you've testified this morning.
Can I get those step up, please? Everyone about a 20-minute morning break. As I send you out this break, I'll remind you that we're in the course of trial, not to discuss this case among yourselves, not to discuss it with anyone else, not to allow anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence, not to speak at all with the attorneys, witnesses, defendant about any subject if your deliberations are finished, not to read or listen to any reports about the case from any source whatsoever. And of course, not to do any research, gather information about or communicate about this case or the people or places involved through any means, including those electronic devices. Let's send you out for that morning.
All right.